Hey friends, hello fourth graders. I wanted to take a little bit of time to present your Module 1, Unit 2, Lesson 6 lesson to you now in case you were unable to attend the live lesson today. So you're going to need your module workbook and a pencil to write with for today's lesson.
I just exited out.
Okay, so we're thinking today as we read about what inspires poets. And our reading purpose is going to be to eventually write an informative essay about a poet. We're going to write about Valerie Worth. Okay. Valerie Worth was our poet that wrote Dog in our Love That Dog book. Okay. So if you look in your module workbook, you will see that sheet that says informative essay prompt there on the left. It is on page 43 of your module workbook. Page 43, okay? And so it says throughout Units 1 and 2, you have been reading texts and learning about what inspires people to write poetry. At the beginning of this unit, you finished reading Love That Dog, you took notes, and you wrote a paragraph about what inspired Jack to write poetry. So the next thing is we're going to be writing an informative essay to answer the question, what inspired Valerie Worth to write poetry? And where can we see evidence of this in her poems? We're going to be finding details from the text to help us answer those questions. If you take a peek at the rest of that sheet, it tells you what you need to have in your informational piece. We will work through this, so don't worry. We're going to be doing it kind of guided in our lessons, what we're going to do and what to remember to do as you write. So here are our learning targets today. I can describe the life of William Carlos Williams and explain what inspired him to write poetry, and I can cite evidence from the text to support the answers to my questions. So yesterday we read A River of Words by William Carlos Williams, okay? We read A River of Words. I want you to think about what kind of book A River of Words is. Pause it. Think for a minute. When you're ready with an answer, come back. A River of Words is a biography. A biography is a book about someone's life. So this book is the story of William Carlos Williams, and it's written by Jen Bryant, okay? So because it's written by someone else, we know that it's a biography, not an autobiography. Autobiography would mean a book about yourself, myself, or whoever wrote it. Okay. And what did we learn about William Carlos Williams in A River of Words? Well, we learned about where he grew up and what he was interested in. We read about what inspired him. We read all about poems that he wrote and how he got into writing poetry. Okay, now next, I'm going to reread to you from the author's note, which is on page 45 of your module workbook. So if you could pause for just a moment, open to page 45 of your module workbook, we're going to reread this author's note. Okay? So, William Carlos Williams was a family doctor in his hometown of Rutherford, New Jersey for more than 40 years. He specialized in pediatrics, care of children, and obstetrics, which is delivering babies. Records indicate that he presided in over more than 3,000 births. Y'all, that's a lot of babies. Like most doctors of his time, Williams made house calls, spending his days and some nights too caring for the sick in their homes. During the Great Depression, when many adults were unemployed and families could not afford to pay, Williams helped them anyway. Often, after stitching a wound, dispensing medicine for a fever, or helping a woman deliver her child after a long night's labor, he would leave with a homemade scarf, a jar of jam, or a warm casserole as payment. Despite the constant demands of his profession, Williams always made time for poetry. In his earliest verses, he adopted the methods of traditional English poets who focused on grand topics and used regular patterns of rhyme. Slowly, however, he developed his own distinctive style in which he used shorter lines, brief stanzas, and little or no punctuation. but perhaps his most important contribution to American poetry was his focus on everyday objects in the lives of common people. In his poems, readers can find fire trucks, cats, flower pots, plums, babies, construction workers, and refrigerators. By stripping away unnecessary details, Williams tried to, quote, see the thing itself with great intensity and perception, end quote. Although he wrote poems for most of his adult life, his poetry was not well known until he was in his 60s. By then, he had already published more than a dozen poetry books as well as several volumes of essays, plays, and short stories. Today, William Carlos Williams is considered one of our most influential American poets, and his work is read and studied in schools and universities all over the world. Williams died in 1963 at the age of 79. So think about the author's purpose. So what were the purpose of the author's note? What was the purpose of the author's note? Well, the purpose was to inform us about the life of William Carlos Williams. What did we learn? We learned all about what he did and his character. And why might it be important to have this author's note in a book? Well, it kind of sums up what the book was about in just a few short paragraphs. So now you're going to move back to page 44 in your module workbook, and together we are going to work to complete this close read note catcher of a river of words. Okay, so in the background box, you're going to tell me a little bit about William Carlos Williams' life. So where was he born? Where did he grow up? About a little bit about his family. Was he married? Okay, those kind of things. Did he have children? Whatever. That goes in the background box. What inspired your poet? Let's think about what it said in the author's note. It said that we could find things like fire trucks and cats and flower pots and plums and babies and construction workers and refrigerators. We saw lots of everyday people and objects. So those are what inspired William Carlos Williams. Well, those were the titles of his poems. Those were the objects that we could find in his poems. And it actually talked about plums, and plums, one of those poems in the book is my favorite in the William Carlos Williams A River of Words book. And this is the plums poem. It's called This Is Just to Say. It says, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet and so cold. So it's all about plums and how sorry, but I ate them, even though you probably wanted them. But they were really good, so I'm glad I ate them, right? Okay, so what evidence do we see of this in his poetry? Well, we see the objects, and he described that they were delicious and cold, the plums, right? So I'm sure he did that with his other poems as well. And in the bottom, reflection and connection. What do you think of William Carlos Williams' life? Write that down. What do you think of him as a person? What do you think about his life as in compared to yours? Like, how do you connect to him? Can you make a text to self or a connection, or a connection that is a one from William Carlos Williams himself to you? That's what you would note in the bottom box now, please. Once you've done that, move on. So really quick, let's think about what inspired him to write poetry. What new information did you learn about William Carlos Williams after reading the author's note today? After reading the biography of him, what could you infer about what inspired him as a writer and to write poetry? And where can we see evidence of that? Just think to yourself about those questions. And tomorrow we will begin looking at Valerie Worth and focusing on what inspired Valerie Worth to write poetry. And that is it, friends.